Hello, how is it going? As basic as this all looks, setting up this camera and tripod and everything has proved very frustrating. I really need to get a new tripod because the one I'm using is actually older than I am. So, frustration. Anyway, one thing I've been doing a lot lately is ingesting media. So, the games and the TV shows and the movies, all that kind of stuff. And I thought maybe I would give my thoughts on these things because I always have a lot of thoughts and a lot of opinions and I kind of have nowhere to go with them. So I've kind of thought like maybe see if all of you would be interested in hearing what I think about things. As totally a non-professional critique person who only has opinions and has never been trained in like story structure or script writing or anything like that. Let's see what I come out with. So just keep in mind that I'm not actually, as much as it might sound like, I'm not shitting all over this thing. I'm just kind of giving my feedback on it, some of the things I liked and some of the things that I would have liked either explained more or done differently. Not necessarily a statement on things being good or bad. It's probably going to sound that way, but disclaimer / covering my own ass, I don't mean them that way. So something I've been watching on Netflix lately has been a show called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, or Chilling Tales, something like chill. Super chill Sabrina. Sabrina's so chill. Something I used to watch when I was a lot younger during the 90s was Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Not like, you know, I was an avid fan or something like that. It's just something that would come on whatever TV station I was watching at the time. I'm talking about the days before Netflix and all that. When I found out that they were remaking Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but giving it like a dark kind of satanic twist to it, super into the idea. And just, I know some people are going to be like, oh, it's actually based on comic books. But like, let's be 100% honest here. I doubt they're targeting the people who read the Archie comics. They're more than likely targeting people who watched the TV show in the 90s. They maybe, I don't know, am I mad wrong for thinking that? But as of shooting this video, I think I'm like halfway through the 3rd season. So this is just going to be my opinions and my feedback and my preferences for what happened in the 1st season. There's going to be spoilers in this video. So the first thing I felt when I saw the show is I really like how the town looks. It's a weird thing to point out, but all of the buildings are kind of like modernized but old looking, especially like the house Sabrina lives in. It's just really weird looking old building, but like you can tell they probably have internet and stuff. So the show kind of pulls this like 1950s mixed with modern day type thing, which it actually kind of, it works pretty well. That's kind of the only way I can explain it. And once you can make yourself okay with that, that solves a lot of possible issues you might have with the show. So you just got to remember, while a lot of like the cars and the buildings and stuff look old fashioned, it is supposed to be set in, you know, our time. And just from all the buildings being old and it being in kind of, it seems to be like a semi-rural area, so there's like woods and forests and stuff, it totally gives you like a witchcraft kind of spooky vibe. So really like that as well. Something that I noticed pretty early on though that kind of bothers me, and remember, I don't have any kind of film background, I'm just like speaking from my immediate response to this, was they use these weird lenses. I know this is a weird observation, but once you're aware of it, you won't be able to help but notice it. They use, I think they're like some kind of anamorphic lens. So like the middle of the shot will be more or less in focus, but other areas, especially around the edges, are weirdly blurry. So it looks like whatever's being shot is supposed to be like a dream or like some kind of state of delirium or something like that. But it never is. Like, it's very stylized and it's very specific, but it's done totally at random. Like in the middle of scenes, it'll change from like normal camera lenses to these weird wide angle blurry things, but it's still just like the same dialogue. And once I started noticing it, it got really distracting. So I was kind of like, sure, use this for like when something magical is happening maybe, or, you know, someone's having a dream or a vision or something like that, or, you know, if the character you're watching is in a certain state of mind. But they were honestly just mixing it in with different shots from blurry, weird, dreamy lenses. I don't know, if you've noticed it, let me know. Or if there's a reason for them using it, let me know. Because from what I can tell, they were just using them totally at random for no real reason. So another thing I really liked was you could tell whoever's making the show, they're really into practical effects and using practical effects. So they'll use CGI sparingly for the most part, So it's always going to be facial prosthetics or like animatronics and you know, stuff like that, which I'm really into. And that works in a lot of scenes really, really well. Especially when the devil comes into it. He's like this big goat-headed man. He really has this like huge monstrous goat head, and like the lips move and the eyes blink, and it's like the jaws. Just, it's class. It looked class. Or like there's a lot of different demons and stuff that'll come up from hell. And those will be people with like really good facial prosthetics for the most part. There's one character that came into like a later season, and like you could kind of see the eye holes in the mask, which I was kind of like, come on. Again, for the most part, unless you're looking for that, unless you're being that kind of cynical person like me, you're not gonna notice, and it's done really well. Another really cool thing I liked, which happens in like the first or maybe like the second episode, is how they introduce Salem the Cat. Which, like, Salem was in the original show, who was kind of just a puppet for the most part, but he was really likable. In this one, he has like maybe 2 lines, but he's really fucking cool. Like, witches have familiars in this one, which are like their pets, but they're really kind of shape-shifting goblins. And he's like a wild one that bonded with Sabrina. You kind of only get like a slight glimpse of his true form as he's hiding behind a thing, but he's like a big monster who just like takes the form of a cat. I just thought it was like a really cool feature kind of thing. Next part of the video, I'm just gonna run through a bunch of points in the plot for season 1 that I liked or I'm confused about. Right, more or less at random. This is going to be a bit of a word vomit. I'll structure it in post. It starts off and Sabrina comes into it, and you're introduced to a bunch of the characters and all that usual stuff. The scene is set kind of thing. And the main premise is that Sabrina is secretly a witch, and she has to maintain her satanic origins and her other satanic half of her life from her mortal friends. And the first big plot point, which everything's kind of revolving around, is she has to go through a dark baptism. When a witch turns 16, they have to sign their name in this big book of the beast, which is the devil's book, and then they're a full part of the coven. Sabrina's excited for this, Sabrina's family's excited for this, apparently the witch community is excited for this, but she's not allowed to tell her friends. And something they keep kind of bringing up with her is that she'll have to leave her human friends behind. The only kind of explanation for that is because a witch's lifespan is so much longer than a human's, she'll only get attached and break her own heart. Although something it never really super explains is, are witches another species from human effectively, or are they like super powered humans? Can a mortal become a witch? Hasn't been explained yet. It's also explained how Sabrina's parents died in a super non-suspicious plane crash, and that her dad was head of their local church effectively, and he was like a prodigy, and he was super good at the old witching, and that her mother was a mortal. So as we're getting closer to the dark baptism, Sabrina starts to get kind of cold feet effectively, and she's kind of like, why do I have to sign my life away? I don't like how any of this sounds. So she has all these doubts and stuff, and she goes to her aunts about it, and she's like voicing her concerns. And they're all shocked and appalled and like, what? But I don't understand how does she not know any of this? Like, they kind of repeatedly say how her whole life has been leading up to this moment, yet she knows literally nothing about getting a dark baptism. And now she's like, oh no, but it's like, this hasn't been thrown on you. You were told a long time ago you'd have to do this. Why are you only worried now? And why are you only telling us you don't know anything about this now? I was kind of like, how do you not know this? How are you not okay with this? How do you not know? So, anyway, progressing the story, so her family calls in their like local high priest, who is this really cool character called Father Blackwood. And he comes in and he's like, you know, real well dressed, and he has this deep baritone, slightly British voice. And he's got these sharp fingernails and a big fancy cane. As soon as they introduce him and they're like, this is Father Blackwood, he's our local high priest, I was like, definitely, that guy's probably a satanic priest in real life. 100% believe it. And he like empathizes with her, and he kind of explains everything, and he's like, no, what are you talking about? You don't give up any freedoms. Satanism is all about freedom. Which is apparently quite true. Like in real life, Satanism's supposed to be about like worshipping yourself kind of thing. The baptism rolls around then, and she kind of walks up to this altar, and there's all these witches sitting around, and she's kind of like, she's got the pen in her hand, she's like half written her name. I think it might have actually been like a knife, she had to like sign her name in blood or something. Anyway, she's given her autograph. She starts like listening to what Blackwood's telling her, and it's like not what he was saying before. And she kind of like looks up and she's like, that's not what you said before. And he kind of just like blanks her and keeps saying the thing. And she's like, what? And he's like grabbing her wrist and stuff, and she's like, no. So she's kind of like looking around, and her aunts are like, fucking do Then she's like looking around in panic more, and she sees the ghosts of her parents being like in slow motion, like, leg it, run away. So she fucking gets free and she like legs it, and a whole big thing kicks off. And the next morning she has to like face her family in shame because she's like, I couldn't go through with it. And they're all sitting at breakfast and they're all pissed off. Then she tells them that she saw the ghosts of her parents and they were warning her. And they're all like, whoa, what? And everyone's real taken aback and like, oh, this is serious. She's like, that was the big thing why I ran, because I could see my mum and dad telling me to. There's something was wrong. And everybody takes this really seriously. So they never talk about it ever again. Like, I'm halfway through season 3 now, and they never bring up the ghosts of her parents ever again. So I'm kind of like, why did they tell her to run? Come on, I wanna know. They just never explain it. So I really don't want to poke holes in it, but that was a bit of a hole for me. Moving on, they introduced this one character, and she is by far my #1 favorite character in this show. I noticed online everyone refers to her as Madam Satan, but she kind of introduces herself, I think like halfway through season 1, as Lilith, who's the mother of demons and like the right-hand woman for Satan, and she's class. The actress playing her does an awesome job. Like, she is able to act like really like soft and caring when actually she's fucking dark and manipulative and just demonic. And it's like, yes, cool, perfect. And she has a lot of these meetings with the devil. And like I mentioned before, there's some really cool practical effects. Like when he first gets shown, he like emerges from this like burning tree with dead bodies hanging from it, and he's this monstrosity, and fucking teeth on his stomach, and this like goat head that's just like roaring, and you're like, holy shit, he looks awesome. So as cool as his like goat facial prosthetics are, when he has a couple of meetings with Lilith, man, the voice they picked is not good. Like, I'm just gonna be totally honest, I don't like the voice that they gave like Lucifer, like fucking Lord of the Underworld, who's this hulking monstrous creature. He sounds like a whispery old man, not in like a cool like, you know, Whispers of Sauron type thing. He literally sounds like this. And I'm like, that is super not intimidating at all. It doesn't match. What? He just sounds like he's not got great lungs, like. And they stick with it for every scene that he's a big goat monster. Even if it's like it's supposed to be this big action, like bursting in type thing, he's just shouting in this whispery old man voice. It's not even old man, he just sounds like he has a really sore throat. And not in a gravelly way, it's in like a I kind of know what they were going for, but I don't feel it hit the mark. I'm gonna jump to something more positive in a second, but just another point about, you know, goat monster Satan. When they first introduce him, when he's like bursting out of that tree I mentioned earlier, it's really intimidating because it's like shot super scarily. But they end up like showing him a lot. Like Satan just kind of ends up hanging out a lot. So you get a good look at him in his monster form a lot, and it's not super intimidating. He like the mouth that I mentioned earlier with all the teeth on it and stuff, it really just kind of looks like a pattern on his shirt. And he's kind of scrawny and like lanky. You kind of think he's sort of like a minotaur sort of thing when he first emerges. But he ends up just kind of being really skinny, which combined with that wispy kind of voice, it's really not intimidating. I think it might have been a better move if they had like kept him like in the shadows a bit, or you don't get a good look at him all the time. Or else like really when he's in that form, he should be like physically intimidating, and when he's in like the shadows and you can't see him, he's like manipulative. Yeah, it kind of just made the devil a lot less scary, which it kind of felt like he was supposed to be scary this whole time. And whenever he gets mentioned, like, you know, the Dark Lord appeared to me last night, everyone's like, oh, what? But then apparently he just appears to everyone. At one point, Satan appears to a barman and like buys the main character's drinks, and it's just like, why is everyone shocked and amazed whenever this happens? He apparently appears to everyone. So I feel they could have used him physically a little more sparingly, because eventually you just kind of get used to it and he's not this dark god kind of thing. I know this is a big ranty part of this, but I don't mean it as negatively as it comes across, I hope. You kind of end up confused about who the bad guy is, because everyone worships the devil in it. It's kind of the point of them being witches. But you're not sure if anyone actually likes the devil. I guess, you know, maybe it was supposed to be like, we really love his power, but we're scared of him. But then they're like plotting against the devil, or plotting against doing the devil's work. When they're Satan worshippers, surely they should be all about that. With the whole thing of Sabrina legging it away from her baptism, everyone's pretty pissed at her. Her family ends up coming around and kind of forgiving her. Then it comes out that effectively Sabrina's getting sued by the devil. Which I don't think is that ridiculous, because like Satan's all about making contracts and bargains, right? So if someone breaks a contract, there's got to be repercussions. And it ends up that Sabrina finds out that one of her dad's old friends lives in the town. He's a mortal who knows all about devil law or satanic law. So he agrees to help Sabrina. Whole thing happens. They're like, your dad actually signed the book for you when you were a little kid, so we already own you. So there's this whole thing that while Sabrina's being sued, her family's powers get taken away or something, or just her aunt's powers get taken away. So they start getting all old. And they really emphasize, you have no witch powers now. They're gone. But then at one point, one of her aunts like reveals this magic hidden item. But it was like, hold on, your powers are gone though. Why? How did you do that? And it never explains it. I don't think people maybe noticed when they were putting it together. But it was like just a kind of straight up inconsistency that she had no powers, yet she could magically reveal an object that was important to the trial to get them their powers back. Anyway though, she ends up proving that Sabrina had a Catholic baptism before she had a dark one. So it meant that the devil's not allowed to touch her. Way, she's off scot-free. They end up having like a settlement where it's like, okay, you can go to Satanic Hogwarts, which is her whole thing, like the Academy of Mystical Arts or something. You have to go to this school, but you can keep your mortal friends. So happy middle ground. Then it's kind of alluded to like, we'll get her when she's at school kind of thing. In the next episode, she ends up going to Satanic Hogwarts. So she walks up to the school and there's like this little boy waiting for her with like her name on a sign. He's really like, you know, prim and proper, and it's like, we've been waiting for you, Mom. Please let me show you the estate. And it's like, oh, cool. He's like a little spooky house elf child. And he kind of shows her around and he tells her that every room in the school is made up of a pentagonal room, 5-sided room, and that there's possibly an infinite amount of rooms in the school, which I was like, oh cool, it's a weird pocket dimension school. They never really kind of touch off that again. I just thought it was kind of interesting. And the whole episode is kind of like, it introduces you to this like alternate love interest that's obviously going to cause problems. His name's Nick and he's like got dark hair and he's a bad boy, and it's like, oh, fucking love triangle, here we come. Then you find out that the little boy who's showing Sabrina around, I think it's in this episode you find out he's a ghost. And you're like, wow, he's a ghost. That's mad. And it's kind of like a little mini twist early on in the episode. And I think it's in this one, Sabrina keeps getting hazed by the weird sisters. And you find out people have been killed because of the hazing. And that all of the ghosts that help out in the school were killed in hazings. And you're like, how deep does it go? But then you're kind of like, wait, what's the crack with these ghosts? Like, do they work for someone at the school? Who got this kid to wait outside for Sabrina? Are they not pissed off that they died? Are they just kind of free help for the school? Is there some kind of spell enslaving them? Can everyone see them? They only seem to appear to Sabrina, but they don't really make a point of that. They're only ever in scenes with Sabrina. Yet the aunts can see them. They just never explained it. And it made a point of being like a little bit of a shock factor that like these dead children were killed in the hazings. The whole way they help Sabrina get back at the girls hazing her, it's pretty cool. Pretty spooky, but at the end of it I was kind of left with more questions than answers about the actual ghosts. It goes on anyway, and Sabrina wants to take like these advanced lessons so that she can fight the devil. Blackwood gives her this like puzzle that her dad made, and he was like, no one alive can figure out this fucking puzzle. If you can figure it out, I'll let you take whatever class you want. And she's like, okay, nice. I think that was like the end of the ghost episode that happens. Next one happens and she figures out the answer. It doesn't really tell you what the answer is, but whatever, it moves the plot along, so who cares? And this fucking thing opens and loads of red sand pours out of it. Turns out there was a demon trapped inside this super trap thing. Sabrina cops it pretty quick that there was a demon in this thing, so she legs it downstairs. She warns her aunts, she gets Ambrose and everything. She's like, demon popped out of this thing my dad made. One of her aunts is like, everybody chill out. And like says a spell and traps her as sand in this jar. And they're all just sitting around the table in that night. They're like, holy crap, that was intense. They're like, what are we going to do with the jar? I was like, just leave it locked somewhere. Everyone goes to bed. And then you find out everyone is now asleep and trapped by this demon in their dreams. Turns out to be a sleep demon. It doesn't explain how the demon got out of the jar though. They made a point of like, we caught it. And then the demon's out all of a sudden. And it doesn't explain how it got out. Like, there was no scene of like the jar like shaking and break or cracking or something, or it like shakes itself and falls off the table, something like that. So I mean, the plot's moving on, but they just caught the demon. How'd that happen? Anyway, they're all trapped in their individual nightmares, which are, some of them are really freaky and fucked up, and it's kind of great. Like, in particular, her cousin Ambrose, his nightmare is he has to disembowel this dead body and like take its guts out, and it's someone he knows, and he's like, oh, I don't want to do it, then he realizes it's him, then it switches and he's looking up at himself, cutting himself open, so he's like in both positions, and it's fucked up. So Sabrina manages to wake up, and she knows what to do with like to get rid of this demon, and she has to like distract it and like keep hiding around the house and stuff like that. So she ends up putting a glamour spell on Salem and making him like it to the other end of the house, and the demon like chases him. The only thing is, they point out in a later episode that she doesn't know how to do that until that later episode. They don't refer back to like her being able to do it in this one. Not poking holes in it, but a little bit of a hole there. Sabrina ends up binding this demon using her aunt's pet spiders, and she's like, of course. And just, for me, the way they frame this kind of like solution to it, they kind of play it like it was supposed to be obvious to everyone watching as well, when you kind of don't know why it was so obvious. They just kind of say it is, and she defeats the demon. Hooray! Overall, good episode, but just saying, there was those two plot holes in there. Then there was like this episode where Sabrina has to do a satanic exorcism, which is when they start alluding to like the higher kind of storyline here, where Sabrina is special. Nothing crazy jumps out at me about it. It's just very much like a nod to the exorcism. It's kind of the next episode is where you start finding out there's some crazy stuff in the Church of Night, so her like local church, where they have ceremonial cannibalism. They kind of draw lots, and whoever gets whatever the short straw becomes like queen of the whatever festival. And over a week, she's treated like royalty, and then they eat that person at the end. So they all fucking pick straws. It's Prudence, who I think I mentioned earlier, is just a really cool character. The actor playing her is just class. She's like intimidating. She's kind of got like this cold bitch thing going on, but she's really interesting as well. It's just good character. She ends up pulling the short straw, and she's thrilled because she's like, oh yes, now I get to sit at the right hand of Satan when I die, and I'll be treated like royalty in my last days. This is such an honor. But since Sabrina chose like the second shortest straw, she's pretty much to be her servant for like the last week. So the whole episode is her trying to convince Prudence that cannibalism is wrong. Which, just a thing that doesn't make sense to me real quick, not even giving out, it's just me being picky, that everyone in the church, which is about 100 people, from what we can see, who are sitting in this old church, they keep talking about, for the rest of the episode, how they've been fasting all week in preparation for eating the queen of the festival. When you divide an 18-year-old girl's flesh between 100 people, that's like a couple of rashers or something, or like a sausage each, right? There's not enough teenager to go around. I just feel like the proportions are off, you know what I mean? So Sabrina's outraged by the whole cannibalism thing, and she's super not cool with it, and she's shocked and appalled. But they never kind of go into like have her aunts eating a bunch of people then? Do they eat a person every year? They might have said at one point, like, every 10 years we do this. But then would Sabrina as a baby have eaten a person? Do they just never talk about them? I just wonder. Also, it ends up, Prudence finds out it's a whole conspiracy to get her killed, so she ends up not doing it. And they're about to cancel the whole thing, and some random girl stands up and goes, I'll be the queen, and like cuts her own throat, and everyone kind of jumps on her then and just pulling bits out of her. It just seemed really unhygienic. Very unhygienic case of cannibalism. So there's also kind of a part in this episode where this kind of thing that's fleshing out the background of all the other characters, where her friends are finding out about like their family history. So instead of going on to like myheritage.com, they're looking through like old trunks or talking to their old relatives, which we find out Sabrina's boyfriend is actually descendant from witch hunters who landed in the area during like pilgrim times, which then ties into Sabrina and Prudence and Lilith all being in like this wooded area, while Harvey's family takes him out for like his first hunt. Harvey and the lads end up finding this deer, and they're like, okay, it's Harvey's first time, he needs to take the shot. And we're left with Harvey pointing the gun and being like, we cut to Sabrina, we hear the gunshot, they leg it, they find the deer, and it turns out the deer is actually a familiar. Prudence is like, oh, we need blood for blood. This is one of our own that these fucking witch hunters have killed. Which kind of causes a whole chain of events to happen. Pretty much the witches want to kill Harvey and his brother. But the whole cool thing with Harvey being a witch hunter, they never really bring it up again. Also, there's like this random familiar who's in the form of a deer just kind of running around the woods, but they never explain where it came from or who it belonged to. They just introduced this character who was like an old exile witch. I think it would have made sense if she had like dropped dead or something because her familiar had been killed and it was too much of a shock to her. I think that would have maybe made sense, but while it's fine that something's unexpected, it just seemed very specific. I don't think it was necessarily at this point, but they do start kind of using the character of Harvey's dad a lot more from this point in the story. For a lot of the early interactions in, I think, season 1 and 2, Harvey's dad is kind of like a mean drunk, and Harvey's older brother is always protecting Harvey from their dad. But the most really noticeable thing, for me anyway, is that the guy playing Harvey's dad, he kind of just like awkwardly stumbles in and out of any of the scenes he's in. It's really just kind of like an awkward entrance and a very specific awkward exit every time he leaves the room. Like he kind of comes in, says his lines, then turns and leaves. Once I noticed it, I couldn't not get like a really clumsy vibe from Harvey's dad then. Maybe it was just me, I don't know. So it's either this episode or the next one where there's this accident in the mines, which is actually the witches trying to get back at Harvey and his brother for shooting the familiar. But those witches don't know that Sabrina has put like a protection spell on Harvey. Only Harvey gets out. And Sabrina blames herself. She's like, I should have protected all of them. And there's this fucking really cool storyline that I'm really into where she feels so bad about Harvey's brother dying and blaming herself, and she starts dabbling in like necromancy, which is supposed to be really complicated and really dangerous. Everyone she asks for help in bringing back his brother is like, don't fucking do it. You don't know what you're doing. And Sabrina, being this kind of like naive, stubborn, driven girl, she's like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. Which is when they introduce why there's a graveyard in front of Sabrina's house. Turns out it's this magical bit of ground that if you bury witches in it, they come back to life. It's called a cane pit. Sabrina ends up deciding she's going to bring back Harvey's brother, and she's going to sacrifice one of the 2 witches that got him killed. So they do this whole really fucked up ceremony in the woods, and then they slit this girl's throat. And they're like, whoa, fucking Sabrina killed someone. She's hardcore. Then they bring her to this cane pit, throw her in, and she comes back to life. So her cousin Ambrose is really like, do not do it. Please don't do it. You don't know what you're messing with. The next day she comes back and he's like, did you fucking do it? And she's like, yeah, I did it, and look, it didn't work, and I'm really bummed out about it. And he's like, look, it's probably for the best. You don't know what you're meddling with here. It couldn't have gone well. And she's like, yeah, I mean, we laid the clothes out in the woods, and just nothing. And he's like, what does it matter about the woods? And she's like, well, his body didn't appear. And he's like, no, because the soul returns to the body. And there's just this cool moment where they're both like, oh my god. Where Harvey's brother was killed in a mine cave-in and they hadn't had a chance to get at the bodies yet. So she's just brought him back and he's fucking buried alive. And you're like, oh shit, she actually fucked him over worse than him being dead. Ends up anyway, Harvey's brother comes back to life, but he's like walking catatonic sort of thing. But they're like, oh, it's shock. He's back. He clawed his way out. He's such a strong boy. Obviously, he's a fucking zombie. Even they bring it up, they're like, has he eaten yet? It goes on anyway, and then the bodies from this mine cave-in, besides obviously Harvey's brother, who is now alive and well, they start finding the bodies that all have fucking bites taken out of them. So it's like, when they realize this, they're like, oh, he's not eating, not because he's not a zombie, but because he's full. Dun dun dun. Immediately, when they said that, my mind went to, well, do zombies poop then? Because if you eat and you get full, you poop and then you're not full anymore. Does that mean, do zombies poop? Just before we move on to the next part, about the cane pit, so there's this kind of ongoing story that Ambrose is trying to figure out the mystery behind this random adopted witch that got murdered. It says he got stabbed like repeatedly. They really imply that there's some kind of plot going on there, which they never, as far as I've been watching anyway, they never explain it. But now I'm thinking, why didn't they put this guy into the cane pit? If it can bring witches back to life, and they figured out that he's a witch, why didn't they put him in the cane pit? I don't think they ever said how fresh a body has to be. Why didn't they stick this guy straight in and find out what happened? Again, I don't mean to poke holes. Just the more I think about this stuff, the more it kind of bothers me a little bit. Sabrina ends up going to Harvey and telling him that she's a witch. She brought him back to life. this is all her fault. She was trying to fix things. It was a mess. She didn't know what she was doing. She did it wrong. She's always wanted to tell him. That's all the secrets come out. Fucking Harvey takes it pretty well, but he gets pretty fucking pissed off at her, in fairness. But he doesn't get too mad at her. He just kind of goes like, you need to leave. I can't take this anymore. Sabrina ends up going like, look, listen, let me just clean up my mess and I will leave you alone forever. Harvey's like, get out. I'll do it. So she leaves, right? His brother is totally docile, like pretty catatonic. My immediate thought was like, right, they're gonna do a scene where like Harvey puts a pillow over his face and just like smothers him. Harvey goes to the gun cabinet, gets a gun, and like fucking loads it up. It's supposed to be, I guess, this kind of like like not manning up, but like coming to age sort of thing for Harvey, because he's been really paranoid for the whole season that he's a pussy and he couldn't shoot that deer and stuff, but now he has to put his brother out of his misery. Then it cuts to a shot of Sabrina like leaving his house and you hear the gun go off. And I'm just like, how does he explain that to anyone? It's one thing to be like, oh, my brother rolled over and choked in his sleep. It's another to be like, oh, his brains are painting the walls now. I don't know how that happened. At one point they're like, oh, we found him, he did it to himself. He obviously didn't want to live, or he's suffering or something. But it was like, why did you do it that way? Harvey be like fucking traumatized for life, having to blow his brother's fucking brains out. Like, why didn't he just smother him, go to sleep? Shh. Instead he what? Like, I get what they were kind of going for with the whole Harvey shooting his brother thing, but it just seemed like a sudden extreme. Like, they didn't ramp up to him having to like, I can be brave for him. It kind of was just like, I don't like working in a mine, I don't want to shoot this deer, I'll shoot my brother though. I feel like there could have been maybe one thing between him shooting the deer and shooting his brother. Even like his dad being like, you don't know how to be brave or something like that. When times are hard, you don't know how to be brave. But overall, I really enjoyed the whole zombie storyline thing. It got really heavy and really messy, and it was good. So the whole season has been ramping up to this kind of crescendo, and they keep mentioning about how there was 13 witches that got hung. Pretty much Lilith summons back the ghosts of these 13 witches who end up raining havoc on the town. You kind of find out more about them, and these 13 ghosts are apparently super fucking powerful. And rather just having like, oh, they're gonna combine their powers and fuck us all over and just kill everyone, they're gonna combine their powers and summon the Red Angel of Death to kind of release some kind of plague or something. I'm gonna be totally transparent. I have a couple of issues with this episode. The whole summoning 13 ghosts to summon an evil thing that we'd never heard of before seems like an extra step that we don't need. They just summoned these 13 super powerful ghosts. I feel like that's enough of a bad guy. You find out the only way that Sabrina can defeat these 13 witches is by burning down the tree that they were hung from. Lilith convinces Sabrina to sign the Book of the Beast and to complete her dark baptism. Then Sabrina goes to this tree where the 13 witches are like, there's too many of us. There's only ever been 3 people before who had enough power to defeat us on their own. But Sabrina's like, well, there's about to be a 4th. Grr. And you're like, okay, Sabrina, fucking let rip, fucking nail them. And they're like, you can't burn this tree. And she's like, well, I can with hellfire. And the tree starts burning blue, and they all start screaming, they all start burning, and she wins. Then they talk about it later, and Sabrina's like, I tapped into something, some deep, dark anger and hatred and fury. And I was like, whoa, hold on. We go back to that scene real quick. She talked about how she got so angry, but she didn't get angry. She kind of just said the line the same way she said a lot of other lines. If it was me, as like a director or something, I would want her fucking screaming at them. She should have been like, well, but I'll do it with hellfire, like fucking spitting and shit, you know, dribbling on herself a little bit, just with anger. Get fucking veins popping up in her head and everything. I feel like if she had just been fucking screaming, that way it would have been way more impactful. I thought it was a really cool idea for a scene, and the visuals were great. Just, those lines maybe weren't executed the best, if I'm being totally honest. Something I've noticed about the kind of series overall is there's only maybe like 2 characters that can kind of do angry. The rest of them, not so much. I guess because it's supposed to be a team drama and she's not supposed to appear to be the bad guy, but it's about satanic witches. I mean, I think you're supposed to get a little bit dark with that. Like, it was a really good story. That whole thing about her having to sign the book to be able to go fucking Super Saiyan and defeat these ghosts. Really good concept. Okay, last thing. Last point I'm going to make. Last episode I'll talk about. They do a Christmas episode, which is pretty good for the most part. The house ends up possessed by like invisible children, which is like my worst nightmare. Just like 100 invisible children that are being little brats like. So they end up having to summon a witch that like collects children. They're hiding a baby in the house as well. That's a whole other thing. So this witch comes along. They fucking have a few shots with her, and then she hears the baby cry, and she's like, oh, I deserve that baby more than you. They're kind of like, no, calm down, calm down. So they end up being like, right, we're gonna have to fight about this kid. Then the ghost of Sabrina's mother appears, and there's these kind of like cool occult mentions where she's like, here's why I come back, and here's why I'm in charge. I can't remember the specific words, but I was like, ooh, that's real interesting. And they do this whole thing where one of Sabrina's aunts has to like take one arm of the kid, and this child collector witch takes the other arm, and they kind of have a tug of war with it. And Sabrina's aunt's like, no, I can't. So Sabrina's mom's like, well, then she gets the child. Get out of here. Child collector leaves. She's like, baby's mine. Wait. Then you find out that Sabrina had put a charm on a log to make it look like a person. And they're like, how did you ever learn how to do that, Sabrina? And she was like, my mother taught me. And you're like, whoa. Except Sabrina did that in the Sleep Demon episode already. Anyway, they've hyped up for the entire season that there's this big mystery surrounding the death of Sabrina's parents. And now the ghost of her mum has come back, and she gets time to sit down and talk with her at the end of the episode. And she sits down and she's like, you know, tears in her eyes and everything. And the ghost has tears in her eyes as well. You think she's gonna be like, am I doing the right thing? What is happening? I need some guidance. She doesn't though. She goes, I really like a boy. Do you think I should stay with him? And that she talks to her fucking dead mum about a boy. Her suspiciously dead mum who knew all kinds of secrets about her birth. And I was like, what? What? So I know maybe a lot of this came across like I'm not enjoying the show. I'm actually really enjoying it. Just when it comes to stuff like this, there's always moments that I kind of wish it happened in a different way. Or even if I'm like, I didn't like that, I'm not saying I don't like this show, I'm just saying I don't like that one part of it. I would be really interested in hearing all of your opinions. Stick them in a comment down below. Hit me up on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook and shoot me a message on there to my Facebook page. And just real quick, also trying to stream once or twice on Twitch every week. If you want to come and have like live chats with me. I think I'm going to leave it there, guys. Let me know if you like this kind of video, and I will give you my totally uneducated opinion on all kinds of things. That's all for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys.